Hi everyone, we are back at our Women in Art with Ruth Asawa, a sculptor, art advocate, and teacher who was born in 1926 and died 2013. Ruth Asawa was born in California in 1926. Her parents were Japanese immigrants who worked as farmers. Ruth and her siblings helped them on the farm before and after school. During World War II, Japan attacked the U.S. military base at Pearl Harbor. The U.S. government became paranoid of Japanese spies among its civilians, and without cause began arresting everyone of Japanese heritage from 1942 to 1946. More than 100,000 Japanese Americans were held unjustly in internment camps, including 16-year-old Ruth and her family. Her father was placed in a separate camp, and she did not see him again until 1948. In California internment camps where Ruth and her family were detained, there were several artists who had worked for the Walt Disney Studios, and Ruth would pass the time drawing with them. At the end of the war, after the war ended, Ruth attended Black Mountain College in North Carolina from 1946 to 1949. She was inspired by her teachers, who included artist Wilhelm de Kooning and choreographer Mercy Cunningham. At Black Mountain, she also met architect Albert Lanier. They fell in love, married, and moved to San Francisco in 1949. Ruth started making art in her home studio while raising 6 children. In the 1950s, Ruth began making her famous hanging wire sculptures. She described her work as woven mesh, not unlike medieval mail. A continuous piece of wire forms envelopes entire forms, yet all forms are visible, transparent. The shadow will reveal an exact image of the object. Ruth showed her work throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. Her sculptures were a huge hit, and her work was accepted into the prestigious Whitney Museum annual exhibition, and in 1955, Sao Paulo Art Biennial. In 1968, Ruth was appointed to the San Francisco Arts Commission. That same year, she founded the Alvarado Arts Workshop for Children, which became a model for art programs throughout the United States. Ruth's education approach was learn something, apply it, pass it on so it is not forgotten. In 1942, she was instrumental in the creation of Ruth Asawa San Francisco School of Arts. Ruth continued her public outreach into her late 80s and continued to create art up until her death. As Ruth once said, sculpture is like farming. If you just keep at it, you can get quite a lot done. Created sculptures inspired by nature, shapes, and shadows. Helped to establish the Ruth Asawa San Francisco School of Arts. Awarded the 1993 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Women's Caucus for the Arts. Here's her quote: "Art is for everyone. It is not something that you should have to go to museums in order to see and enjoy." In 1968, she created her first representational work, a mermaid fountain for San Francisco's Ghirardelli Square. As a kid, Ruth and her 6 siblings would help with the farm work. While sweeping the barn, she would draw shapes which resembled her future sculptures in the dirt. She also worked in paper origami, and many of those pieces were turned into large bronze public sculptures throughout San Francisco. Sorry about that, guys. When her art outreach programs had no funding, Ruth would make baker's clay out of flour, salt, and water for her students. The continuous weave in her sculptures was inspired by the basket weaving she saw on a trip to Mexico. I hope you all learned something. Bye, friends.